Welcome to the Good Talk Podcast, where we remind you of the joy of life, the love of God, and the possibilities that lie ahead. It's episode 68 with Pete and Jordyn.
How defensiveness is holding you back.
Ooh.
I almost lost my, I always say the title, but we've been gone for a month and a half.
No, it hasn't been that long, has it? Just a month.
I think it's okay. Since June. We haven't been here since June. And so I feel rusty.
I know, me too. I forgot to do this.
Yeah. So how defensiveness is holding you back, which
do you think you're
defensive? I think is interesting. I can be. It really depends on the situation. And I don't really love the face that you're making right now.
I can't wait to get into this one. No, I've had some major breakthroughs this summer on this topic and seeing how... I'll go ahead and own it and jump to it. How I have at times, I think, damaged some relationships and damaged some personal growth because of my defensiveness.
I don't see you as a super defensive person, but I do see you are stubborn in sometimes.
Yeah, there's moments that it's really messed with me. So we're going to talk about that today. We'll start a new series next week. We're back to, should be pretty much every week. Start a new series on called A Life Worth Living. Yep. It's about just intentionality and living life on purpose. Yep. And I don't know, it'd be a couple, 3-4 weeks long.
Yeah, I think it'll be really good, obviously. If you guys don't know Pete, he is a life coach as one of your careers. Yeah. And so you work with some really incredible people through tons of exercises. And I feel like you have probably garnered a lot of very practical applications for truly living a life that's worth living. So we're big fans around that.
I think so many people are living what I call, you've heard me use this phrase, a default life. Mm-hmm. Life's just happening to them and they respond to the events and circumstances as they unfold. The opposite of a default life is a design life where you actually take control. Mm-hmm. And you can take control of your decisions and circumstances, and it's a completely different life that is filled with passion and it's filled with purpose. And so I'm excited to talk about that.
Yeah, that'll be really good. Yep. I'm excited. So we were gone and then?
Yeah, we were gone. And we were gone because, we always take a little bit of a summer break from the podcast. But, man, we were just traveling like crazy. Had some fun vacations with the family.
Yep, we had 2 beach vacations. One with your boys and your mom and stepdad. And we went down to Florida in Tennessee, or just to the south, you go to Florida for the beach, which is kind of not normal, I guess, because we were talking to some people from Michigan and why do you go to Florida? Because it's so hot down there. But that's the goal. So we went to Florida for a whole week. That was awesome. We had a great time. Everybody in one house. It was a blast. And then we did another week of vacation with my family, truly a week after that. Yeah. So it was a lot of beach time. Thankfully, Pepper loved the beach because we had a lot of it.
She really did love the beach.
She did great. Yeah, I thought she would. At her age, I hated sand. I hated textures, things like that. So she was much better at that than I was. But yeah, so that was with my whole side of the family. We had 22 people in one house. Yeah. Lots of people in a house.
That is a lot.
Thankfully, we had it was a big home, so we could spread out. But it was you got to experience that for the first time.
It was fun.
And then we had Pepper's birthday 2 weeks after that.
She is 1 now.
She's 1 whole year old. I literally, I don't believe it.
Is 1? No, 1's not a toddler yet. That's 2.
No, medically, she is now considered a toddler. Wow. When you go to the doctor, you have to check toddler. I did that.
Wow, we have a toddler.
A couple days ago.
Let's go.
No, it's so sad. She's always going to be a baby to me. But anyway, so that was fun. We had a big party. We'll have a vlog with that, all the footage from her parties soon. So anyway, it was a lot. It was a lot shoved into 3 weeks, and I was so excited for those 3 weeks, and now they're over, and now I'm sad.
Yeah, that's kind of the way summer vacations work.
I know, but it's now it's August and it's just hot, and there's nothing there's no football yet. There's no. It's you're past the point of the pool being fun. I'm just
generally after July 4th weekend, I'm kind of ready to move on to fall, which is unfortunate because it's still a lot of summer left.
Yeah.
But I'm like you. I kind of okay, it's hot. There's nothing we can do except for go to the pool.
Exactly. It's been, I don't know. It's been great though.
First world problems.
There is a vlog up of some of our vacation. You'll see why we almost quit the vlog if you go check that out.
I was done.
With the Wilsons. If you search that on YouTube, you can find that video. And then that's where we'll post Pepper's stuff. So enough about us. I want to hear about why I'm being so defensive, Pete Wilson, how it's holding me back.
Well, let me set it up. So
Okay.
a couple things happened this summer that were pretty eye-opening for me. One was a scenario. I won't give all the personal details, but someone had confronted me about something they thought I had done wrong. And it wasn't not a big thing, not a moral thing or whatever, but I disagreed with their assessment of the situation. And I expressed that, my disagreement.
Which you would not have probably done years ago. You've grown a lot in kind of just expressing yourself.
Yeah, but I'm trying to find the balance, right? So that conversation didn't go real well, to be honest. And then it was a couple weeks after that, I was actually on a flight, and I read this quote that really kind of convicted me. It said this: when you're committed to proving a point in a conflict, you're simultaneously committed to not hearing the other person. I was like, ouch. I thought back to that conversation. And maybe I did prove my point. Maybe I did, get my thoughts across. But I don't think that other person actually felt probably heard in that moment. And I was like, man, I think I probably could have handled that better. And then what happened is about a week after that, I had to confront somebody. And I was confronting them. I didn't feel like they were carrying their weight on a project. Tried to, constructively point that out. And they got defensive instantly. And I'm just watching them get defensive, and I could see myself in them. And I was like, dang it.
Yikes.
That's exactly what I did. And I can see how that is extremely frustrating to people when they might approach me about an opportunity for growth in my life, and I just immediately go to being defensive and pushing my point or defending myself. And I think this is a pretty natural thing for a lot of people. It happens to all of us. And someone, it could be your spouse, it could be a family member, it could be a coworker, brings up something that you said or maybe something that you did in hopes of shedding some light on your behavior. And instead of listening what they have to say and unpacking the criticism, you just feel attacked and you go on the defensive. So I don't think this is uncommon. I think the vast majority of you that are listening to this podcast right now have probably experienced somebody getting defensive with you, and that was frustrating. And my guess is the vast majority of you from time to time get defensive with others. It is a very easy habit to slide into. And if you get to a place where your go-to response anytime someone brings up an issue with you is to be defensive, that's very damaging to your relationships. I mean, it really is. And among other things, it sends a direct message to the people that are, approaching you that their opinions don't matter. And it makes it really hard to engage with you in healthy communication. Now, I'm not saying that the person approaching you doesn't also have a responsibility. Right. Anytime you're approaching somebody to shed some light on a behavior, there are certain things and ways that you can approach that conversation. And maybe that'll be part 2 of this conversation one day. Definitely things you can do to make sure that
it's received
a little better. But whether or not they do that or not, I still think we have a responsibility to try to create an environment where we can grow and people can feel like they are heard and they understand, right? And again, I think defensiveness is a really hard habit to break. I think almost all the time when someone kind of, engages you with some form of criticism, your brain, I don't think most of our brains are hardwired for growth. I think most of our brains are hardwired for protection. And so it makes sense that your initial reaction is going to be to want to be defensive. But what I'm going to encourage all of us to do, starting with myself, and then of course you as well, Jordyn.
You're next in line, Jordyn.
Is that you hit the pause button in that moment. And so this is a really hard habit to break. And what I want to do is just talk about 5 different signs of defensiveness, and maybe a few tips to avoid it.
Great. Can't wait to hear it.
You ready to dive into this?
I'm ready.
The first one is just something we're going to call labeling. And labeling happens when a person tries to state their position and you simply reduce their behavior to labels. So this is they'll approach you about something, but you flip it real quick to you're just being mean or you're being unreasonable, right? Or sometimes this gets said a lot, especially in intimate relationships, is you're crazy, Like, you're just crazy. That's not what happened or whatever. And it's just a common way for defensive people to assign labels to themselves and to other people as a way to defend themselves. So sometimes we assign the labels to them. Sometimes we assign the labels to ourselves. And you'll say something like this: well, I guess I'm just a lousy spouse and everything is my fault. Mm-hmm. See that? Mm-hmm. Or you might say something like, I guess I'm just a terrible dad.
Yeah.
And that's not what the other person is saying.
You're trying to make them feel bad that they're trying to talk about something to you that's hard to hear.
That's right. So you just label it. And I thinking back, there's so many times that I've done that.
Yeah.
You don't have to so quickly agree.
I mean, can I say one that you're really guilty of?
Yeah.
And this may be one of your points. You often say, I'm allowed to feel like this. I'm allowed to be frustrated. I'm allowed to be mad about this. And that's not untrue, but it may not have been exactly what I was addressing
That's right.
was what you feel, but maybe how you projected it.
And you weren't probably in that moment. I don't know the specific example that you speak of, but you probably in that moment were not saying, Pete, you're not allowed to feel angry.
Right.
You probably didn't like the way I was representing my anger or expressing my anger.
Exactly. Yes.
But you see how I can take that and label that.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, that's a great example. I'm just learning through your mistakes.
Thank you. All right, enough of you.
Okay.
No more sharing for you.
No more questions.
No, you're right. You're right.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right,
I hear you. I hear you. And again, with almost all these, my tip is just breathing. My tip is slowing down enough to listen to this person, to give them ample opportunities. Hey, is there anything else? How did it make you feel when I did that? You're trying to pull out of them, believe it or not, more information instead of throwing a label on it that shuts the conversation down right away.
Right. Okay. I like it.
2 is doubling down when you're wrong. And I think Jordyn, you might be guilty of this from time to time.
Okay.
So
I need
it's
examples.
You had an argument and you realized your stance was incorrect, and regardless, you continue to argue the point, thus completely defeating like the whole purpose of the discussion, and further fueling the disagreement. I have done this. I've admitted this publicly, that there can be times I'm in a fight with you, and it hits me that, oh, she might be right. But instead of just stopping in that moment and saying, you know what, you might be right, I will double down and keep going with the argument, thinking maybe that can convince you.
That's the absolute worst feeling, when you realize you're wrong, but you're too far in and you're too mad. You just can't. There's like no turning back, and then it's just awkward. Yeah. I think we both do that probably. Definitely. And just keep digging.
No one likes to be wrong, right? No one likes to be proven wrong. I get that. I don't. I hate it. But I think there are times when the people around you, whether it's a coworker, whether it's a boss, whether it's a spouse, whether it's your kids, I think when someone lays out a valid point and you realize you were incorrect, the absolute best thing you can do, and it goes a long way in any relationship, is just own it.
I mean, it's so easy. Like when you look at it, when you're not mad. But in those moments, like say I was really, really wrong and I knew I was wrong, and all of a sudden I just said, you know what, you're right. The whole thing is diffused.
Yeah.
Like it's not like I lose, you win. It's like the fire was put out immediately. But it's so hard to do it. It's like, I don't want to put the fire out. I want it to burn the house down.
Yeah, that's right. I'm going to keep going. I'm going to ride this all the way.
Oh, this is like counseling. Okay, what's the third one?
The third one is, I couldn't really come up with a great term. I wanted to call it passive aggression, but I think it's also pushing it back on the other person.
Gaslighting.
So, gaslighting would be a great thing. So let's say you come to me and you want to address something that you've seen in me or a pattern you've seen in me. The temptation for me is to immediately flip that, and instead of owning it, right? And I think this most often happens when you're busted. Like when you know what the other person is saying is absolutely true, right? And you can't come up with a good defense. You immediately go to, well, you blank. Or remember when you did this? Well, you never blank, right? And so...
Or I did this because you did this. Like,
that's right.
You treated me like this, so I responded like that's gaslighting, where it's just like...
Yeah.
Sorry, there's a fly and it's
That's
driving me
right.
absolutely
We have
crazy.
a fly problem in our house.
I don't know what's going on. We open the doors a lot, but there are flies everywhere outside of our out of our house. I don't get it.
Do you feel dirty?
No, no, I don't.
I do. Just seeing
Oh,
flies
you mean
around.
to see? I thought you meant physically right now.
No, no. I didn't mean like you're so dirty.
I know.
It's
It's like I
flies.
showered for this. No. Anyways, so if you see flies, we're sorry. Continue.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
So, but you get the
gaslighting,
point.
passive aggressive. Yes, I get
Yeah,
that.
you're
That's
flipping the argument.
yeah. I feel like that is. I don't know that is our biggest one. I think that's
No.
probably one that neither of us are super bad with. I think all the others I am.
Well, I think with the passive aggression comes in, let's say, especially in the workplace, when a coworker sits down with you and shares something that they feel like is out of whack or something you could be doing better. You know, the reality is there's a good chance there's some things that you have your own list about them.
Yeah, and you've held on to it.
And you haven't had the courage to do the hard step of actually sitting down and communicating that with them.
Okay, so it's so funny you say that because I thought the passive aggressive comes in relationships that are not very intimate. I don't mean that
Correct.
like I just mean like you don't have a very open relationship with communication, because the reason I don't think we don't have a problem with passive aggression is because we communicate a lot, probably too much, and that can lead to other defensiveness. But I feel like when you are having that passive aggressive tendency, it's probably because you've been holding on to a lot of things that you haven't communicated. And so when someone does approach you, you're like, oh, okay, let's go.
Yeah.
Like I have a whole list. And I can say that about other people probably in my past in life and all of that. But with you, I don't think I have that as much, because that's a great example.
Yeah.
At work, you really can't. Like you can't just every time you feel something like hash it out. I mean, I guess you can, but you're not going to be well liked.
Well, and for those of us who tend to sometimes be passive aggressive, which I can have that tendency as well. I think that, it's when you hear them start pointing some things out to you, literally in your mind, you're like, are you kidding me right now? Are you kidding? Like, I've got a laundry list on you. As if somehow they aren't aware, or that them approaching you means that they think they're perfect. That's not what they're usually saying in that moment.
Right.
That I'm perfect. I don't have anything going on here.
Right.
That's usually not the case, but we make that assumption.
I think that's a really good practice when someone's coming to you with something, to tell yourself that they're not saying that they're perfect either.
That's right.
It's just like a reminder, like they're not trying to place themselves above me, because that's what it feels like.
Yeah.
Like you feel like you're being put down on a low level, being spoken at, instead of it being like even playing field, trying to help each other get better.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
And it's a big deal because, what we're talking about here is your growth. And so people who consistently go to a defensive stance in some kind of conversation like that, they're ruining their chances for further growth for themselves. And they're also simultaneously destroying healthy communication inside of that relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
That's
it's
good.
kind of this double whammy. All right.
Okay.
Number 4 is mind reading. And it's another sign of defensiveness is to assume that you know what the other person is thinking and voicing, that in an effort, to push the argument off of them. This might sound like, so you just think I'm a loser and I can't do anything right. Right? So I'm again, that's probably not what they said.
In their mouth.
You're putting words in their mouth. You're assuming you know what they're thinking. You could say something like, you're right. Everything is just my fault. When somebody says that, like back to you, when you confront them about something, essentially what they're saying in that moment is, I'm done with this conversation.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm ready. It's like, it's just a quick way of, it's a nicer way of saying shut up.
It probably also means that person already has insecurity about the thing that you're talking about.
Oh, absolutely.
Because if you shut it down that quickly, obviously in your mind has fired off tons of things you've told yourself about that same thing over and over and over.
Yep.
And you're like, I can't handle that and you at the same time. So let's just stop. And it's like a defense mechanism, even just in your mind, not actual true defensiveness, but like you're biologically, I feel like you shut it down because it's too much.
Yeah, it reminds me of that Charles Cooley quote we've talked about on the podcast before, where he said, I'm not who I think I am. I'm not who you think I am. I am who I think you think I am. And when that gets entered into that argument where you start trying to read their mind and you think you know what they actually think of you, that's going to bring out a lot of insecurities in that
Yeah, that's a really big one. I think mind reading in and of itself is just its own form of like projection of your own shame, kind of, because they're thinking the worst, and it's usually not probably the case.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
Here's the fifth sign. This is one of the most like obvious signs of defensiveness, is that you often have post-conversation guilt. Meaning, most people who are defensive also inherently later on realize, that maybe they were wrong, maybe they didn't handle the situation well. And what they'll almost always do is go back to that person and say, hey, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have responded that way. You were right. The problem is you might do a lot of damage if you're always having to go back and apologize.
I will say, and maybe I'm wrong here, but I'm not sure that there's a huge percentage of people that actually do have that conversation. And that's why relationships just get frayed.
Yeah.
Is because eventually you can only take so much of that without having some acknowledgement of that circumstance. And I think a lot of times if that person is not apologizing, there could be a whole gamut of reasons, right? But a lot of times it's an awareness thing, a self-awareness thing that is just missing. And there's really not a whole lot you can do with that. But I don't know. I just wanted to raise my hand and say that I've had many people in my past not have that awareness.
And never come back.
And humility, quite frankly, to kind of admit that. And there's been several times. I mean, I don't even know how many times that I probably didn't apologize when I should have. But I'm just saying, I think if you are on the level of communication where you are apologizing, I think that's already a great sign that you have some awareness and that you felt the guilt and then did something with that. I think that is a sign that you care about healthy relationships.
Yeah, for sure. I agree with that. I just think that if you can learn to catch it in the moment instead of always having to go back, I think you should go back and apologize. The first example that I gave where I clearly got defensive this summer with somebody, I did circle back.
Yeah, you did.
And say, I'm sorry, I didn't handle that as well as I should have. But the reality is I'd still already done a little bit of damage, and maybe that person won't be as open to come to me when they see an area of growth in my life because of that initial reaction.
Right.
So I feel like I eventually made it right. But man, if I could have caught it in that moment, it could have been a really positive thing.
Right. Yeah. No, that's really good.
So that's kind of my thoughts on that. So I think for those of us who find ourselves responding in a defensive manner, maybe it's become a habit, like just routine for you in your life. I think, the two things that I think about a lot is I pray for one thing. I pray for humility. And by humility, and I sometimes hate using that word, especially in religious circles, because it's just been manipulated in a lot of different ways and often associated with guilt and shame. That's not humility at all. Humility is something totally different. Humility isn't looking down on yourself. Humility is about having an accurate view of yourself. It's really about awareness, right?
Yeah, awareness and the ability to admit when you are not right.
Yep.
Like, period.
And that's kind of my prayer. It's like, hey, God, help. I want to see myself as accurately as I can. I'm going to get comfortable with seeing myself accurately. And the only way that's going to happen is if I live a life in such a way and have relationships in such a way where people feel open and honest about reflecting some things back to me. Because you're not going to see it all on your own. We all have blind spots. So if you don't develop a humility and awareness and an openness to people speaking into your life, you are going to stunt your growth.
Yeah. And I really, as you're talking, this sounds kind of hippy dippy, but I really feel like you have to love yourself in order to be humble, in order to receive, right? Like you have to really be okay with where you are to take that and to want that kind of open conversation. Because there were seasons in my life where I wasn't okay with where I was, or I wasn't super happy with myself or my life. And I didn't want that. I couldn't have that. So I feel like if you do feel like you're in that situation where you truly can't receive that, there's probably some other work and healing and stuff like that. So that's really good. Actually, that was super practical.
Well, thank you.
Now I realize, I think it's beyond it's not necessarily like, oh, here's how not to be defensive. It actually is very much like spotlighting what that looks like. Yeah. And then now later, when you say something really dumb, I'll know immediately you're being defensive. You know,
And
like
you can call me out on it.
no, but
The
it's
goal
like,
is for you to be able to call yourself out
Exactly.
on it, to feel it in
To
that
feel
moment, to just pause and just wait a minute
Yeah.
and let it,
yeah, that's
let it
really
sink
good.
in.
Yep, that's really good. I like it.
Well, I hope it was helpful for
It
some
was
people.
really good. And don't forget, our series is starting next week. It'll be 4 weeks long, A Life Worth Living. So that'll be really good. I'm excited for that one. That kind of is really in your wheelhouse.
It's going to be fun. And
so
we've missed
it'll
you
be great.
guys.
I
We really
know.
have. So it's good to be back.
Yeah, it's been really great. Don't forget to check out the vlog. Like I said earlier, we almost quit it. So there is an episode of about that. And then we're going to continue uploading those as often as we can, just to continue sharing life with you guys.
Yeah.
All right.
And that was another good talk.